Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing very, very well, man. I can't complain at all.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. I'm super excited that you're here and that you want to do this. So thank you for joining in and for contributing. And it's a chance for one, us get to talk. I haven't got to really chat with you in a while, and two, it's a great opportunity for people who maybe have some questions, maybe for you or about the drum corps activity or things like that they may not necessarily know an in or maybe know somebody, but this is like a more comfortable, relaxed environment for people to come in and can ask questions and pick your brain and things like that. So really, thank you a lot for doing this. And for those of you who don't know, Elanders and I first met back at the end of 2016. I'd reached out to him about joining the staff at Southwind. I was really excited at the time. Southwind was on the verge of coming back, and the 2017 season that was coming was going to be their first year coming back to championships and doing a full tour and things. And I really enjoyed what they were doing down in Mobile. And so I was like, man, how can I be a part of it? And he was like, come on down. And I was so excited. And we got to be on staff together for 2 years. And then I ended up moving. But we've stayed in touch, and it's been great. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the time with you. Learned so much. This guy right here is just one of the greatest minds, man. Like, he's so inspirational, so creative. Just a fun guy to be around. I don't know how many Whataburger burgers we've eaten together, but it's been it's been a bunch.
It has.
Man. But thank you guys. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you guys for joining in. So Elanders here is the co-caption head of Southwind Drum and Bugle Corps, which is a great competitive group on open class and drum corps. And you still write the battery book as well?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So all those sick beats that you'd be hearing on YouTube, that's this guy. And I love your writing style. I think it's unique, but it's also very, very competitive, but also it just grooves and it works well with the music and things like that. So that's really cool. So just wanted to tip my hat to you, and I appreciate it a lot. So yeah. So before we jump in and let some people get on here, first, if you're watching and you do have some questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to addressing those. So if you have any of those questions, if you're thinking of them as we're talking, or if you just had a burning question this whole time and you've just been waiting to do it, go ahead and throw it in and we'll get to it. But starting off, I always like to do like a little background of like your upbringing and like what got you started, what got you interested, what is it that, the music just music and competitive activity and just things that you do, what inspires you musically and how all that started, and just like a quick overview of where you've been and how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Let me break it down. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. So the beginning, I think as a child, growing up in a household that music is always ever present. My mom listened to a lot of gospel. She listened to a lot of oldies. Just anything that really, you can kind of bob your head to. So I think I got a very young, appreciation for music as a kid. And I think my first musical venture was probably the choir at church. just to I'm trying to cycle back through everything. So that's really what kind of got me started in, this effort of being in a group with other people and making music. So probably choir in church. I remember having like an electronic drum set when I was a kid, and that was fun to beat around on, but I never really had any private lessons or anything like that. So it was just one of those things to where, I did it for fun around the house. Mom would tell me, stop beating on that thing, so it's time to go to sleep or whatnot. But I think how I started getting into the professional aspect of it, or at least my amateur aspect, if we call it professional now, I'm very humbled by it. But my sisters had gotten into music. My oldest sister in concert band, and my middle sister was a strings player. And kind of going to concerts, seeing them do what they do, I knew at some point I would be joining that fold. I just didn't know really what I wanted to do. But, through listening to all different types of music, like I had this affinity for saxophone. And alto saxophone was like the end all be all. Kenny G was the man. He could do no wrong behind a instrument with a reed on it. So like in my upbringing, I wanted to be this fantastic saxophone player. And, I was so, jazzed to, I love puns too. So, so I was so jazzed to just kind of get started in the whole saxophone playing. So that was the only thing I wanted to play going into middle school. I sat down with the band director. He tried to get me on baritone and trombone and tuba and everything else. And I was like, nope. I'm only going to play saxophone. There is nothing else that this band director is going to tell me that was going to convince me that saxophone was not what I wanted to do. And once he realized that, he just kind of gave up and was like, all right, you're a saxophone player. And I was like, yes. So I started playing saxophone. I played saxophone all the way from 6th grade all the way until my 11th grade year in high school. So my sister, who was a strings player, when she entered high school, of course, strings is not marching band, and she didn't have really any affiliation. And my mom wanted to make sure that both my older sisters were able to congregate with each other in the same activity. So my middle sister went to the band and was like, well, I'm a strings player. What can I do? And they were like, well, you can be in the percussion section. Really, that's the only thing that we can get you in, because, it was like the middle of the summer. So it was like, this is the only thing we can get you in where you can transition quick enough without having to learn a brand new instrument. So my sister joined the drum line going into her freshman year of high school, and she was on the drum line all 4 years. So really, once I started transitioning to go to school, I went into high school as a saxophone player. But I was watching, my sister in the drum line for 2 years prior to that. And I mean, it was like rehearsals, it was competitions, because they had a very competitive indoor drum line at Escambia High School, where I went to high school at. So watching her in all of this stuff, I was just like, man, that's so exciting. That's so fun. I still had this real big love for saxophone, but it was something about drums that just kept tugging at me. It kept tugging at me. And I want to say, like, the first time I saw like a 6-person snare line, play through like a couple of things when I got in high school, like it was like the jaw drop moment. Like, I don't know what it's gonna take, but I gotta do that. You know what I mean? Like, I have to do it. And we watched some drum corps stuff. Summer band during band camp when we had breaks. Like, we would watch some drum corps stuff. And I just always remember thinking like, man, these are some great college groups. Like, how did they get so good? And somebody had to break it down for me and explain to me that that's not college. It's all professional. They do it, outside of the college realm. So what I ended up doing was I joined the indoor group. As a freshman in high school, I played cymbals that first year. Shout out to Kimbo, cymbal fraternity. Big proponent of all things cymbal, because that's where I got my start. I started out as a cymbal player, and I remember we didn't have a tech or anything like that. But our percussion instructor had handed us this cadet's cymbal technique guide. And it was like literally a photocopied giant book of everything that the cadets did from a cymbal standpoint. And the 4 of us, it was like 3 freshmen and a sophomore. The 4 of us went, or 3 freshmen and a junior, sorry. 4 of us had to go sit in a room and just learn how to play cymbals with this book. Wow. And it was tough because cymbals are heavy. And a lot of it was just like, you know, holding positions and, you know what I mean? So it was like, that was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore because I'm just in pain, you know, like saxophone was starting to sound real good, especially because I had a neck strap, you know what I mean? But it wasn't until like I finished that indoor season to where like I was, at that point I was sold. I was sitting 15th chair out of 17 alto saxophones. We had a huge high school band. And I didn't come from the strongest middle school program because, you know, there was only 3 saxophones in my middle school. So I was, you know, middleweight in terms of a saxophone player. I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't the best. So when I got into high school with all these other high school kids and from all the other middle schools that fed into it, I was at the bottom of the pack just because I hadn't had a strong education. I didn't take any private lessons or anything like that. So I was trying to find something that I could excel at because 15th was just not good enough for me. It was like, I don't know if I can jump to the top 5, but I definitely am not comfortable sitting in 15th, like no matter how hard I tried. I think it's just because I didn't have the information. I had the will and, you know, I felt like I had the drive. I just didn't have the information. So I was like, well, I got a lot of information on this drum stuff and I got a permanent resource sitting at the house with me, with my sister. So I asked the band director, could I switch to drums for the fall and just play saxophone for concert season? He was like, yeah, why not? You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to bat an eye and miss you. You're, you know, 15 out of 17. We still got, you know, many other, you know, and it was one of those things where like, you can't be offended when you're at the bottom of the pack and someone asks to like, go do something else. You're like, well, maybe you'll be good at something else. And thankfully he did that because that was kind of my entryway. You know what I mean? And the percussion instructor at the time, Mr. Terry Sanders, he's a great mind. And I went and auditioned for him, and I had my eyes set on the snare line because that's what I remember seeing. And, you know, I thought it was so cool, and I wanted to go do that. And he told me real quick, you ain't ready. And, you know, you gotta be, you know, when you're a kid, you're 15 years old, somebody tells you ain't ready, you know, of course, everything inside of you is crying and screaming like, but if they only saw one more, you know, exercise, that would convince them. It was like, there was nothing I was going to do to convince them because I couldn't even play flam accents at that point. Like, you know, I could barely read rhythms. So he put me on the bass line, and man, I worked my tail off. And that was a good bass line that year. And I marched bass indoor and outdoor and just kept practicing, kept asking questions, picking brains, etc. And funny enough, that year, I got to march bass drum with my sister. She was the section leader. I was on fourth. She was on second, and or first base. She was on first base, I think. And it was a treat to be able to march with my sister her senior year before she graduated from high school because my sister didn't really go on to do drum corps or anything like that. So that was a treat to just be able to share that moment with her. And then after that, I got into the snare line, started getting really good, and I just drummed, man. It became an infatuation with, you know, it was more than, I think it meant more because I always was finding something new with it, and I just kept going. I kept going. After I graduated high school, I started looking for other opportunities. I had my eyes set on drum corps. I wanted to fly out to California to go audition for the Blue Devils, and that ended up not turning out the way that I wanted once I put numbers to page and try to figure out, okay, how much was this going to cost me? And I'm working a part-time job at a movie theater. I was like, it ain't going to happen. Like, be real. Like, unless you driving, like, you ain't getting over there. So I ended up getting a call from Tony Lyman. And it's like I am in full knowledge at the age of 35 now how blessed I am for being in the area that I was and around the people that I knew. Because at that time, I didn't know how my life was going to change going to Hattiesburg to drum. And thank goodness I accepted it because it was one of those things to where I was kind of skeptical. My mom was a little skeptical because I graduated high school young. I was like 17. So when I told her, hey, I'm going to march in Hattiesburg, Mississippi every weekend for the next 6 months, she was like, okay, who you going with? Where they gonna be? Like, who are the, you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those, like, you know, what are you gonna do? So luckily, a good friend of mine named Mario, he rode with me, and we did this indoor ensemble called Eminence at the time. They only lasted about 3 years, but I think they were the catalyst for Pedal, who is like a behemoth now in Scholastic World, which is Tony's group still. But we marched Eminence, and that first year, like, man, there were so many great people that had an impact on me that have gone to do, you know, many other things. Kevin Wellborn, who is now the athletic director at University of Alabama. Matt, I can't think of Matt's name now, but he's a mainstay in Mississippi. I think he was most recently at Pearl High School. Like, Matt Little. Yes, thank you so much, man. But like, there were just so many people that came in and out of that ensemble, and you know, not limiting to Tony and Emily, and like that, like so many people that just had such an impact on my growth level from high school and then jumping up to that next level. So it's like, after I finished that indoor season with all this wealth of knowledge, now I was like, okay, now without a shadow of a doubt, I'm ready to go march some drum corps. And, you know, I kind of set my eyes on Phantom Regiment, went up to the audition camp. I did okay, got told some harsh realities, you know what I mean? Had to have a come to Jesus moment with myself, because, you know, after I left that camp, I didn't want to drum anymore. Like, you know, having so much confidence going up there, I really came back home with like tail between the legs, not wanting to do it. You know what I mean? But once again, my buddy Mario, he kind of stayed in my corner, and he was like, yo, man, I'm going to March Spirit. And he had March Spirit the summer before. So he was like, I'm going to the Spirit camp. You need to come ride with me. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't set the group yet. You need, you know, get the packet, start learning it, and, you know, we're going to go do this thing. So I think I had maybe like 2 weeks to learn the packet. And I mean, I learned that thing backwards and forwards. And because I was like, you know, okay, I got to be impressive without a shadow of a doubt. I cannot let this be the door close if I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? Because I was kind of really shutting down after that point. And I made it. I made it that year, going into Spirit in 2004, marched 2 years, 04, 05. And then after that, I was going to march my age out year. I did not march my age out year because I had decided that I was going to, you know, go out west again and try out for Vanguard and do a couple of different things. And I ended up talking to Shane Gwaltney at a clinic. And he was like, hey, man, you should come up to Mystique, check it out, see what it's like. You know, you've been doing well. So see what that's going to, you know, see if it'll be a good fit for you. So I went up to Mystique, and at that point, I was in this weird transition where I was going from a junior college to a university, and my mom got involved, you know, about what I wanted to do. So I ended up taking a semester off of school because I told her, you know, I'm going to be in Nashville every weekend because I really wanted to do this Mystique thing. And growing up in our area, because indoor was so big, like Mystique was like on the top of the list of things to do. So it was like, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do it because they were always so far away, and I didn't really want to move to Nashville because I had scholarships where I was. But they ended up rehearsing at a high school that was like one exit into Tennessee, across the Alabama state line. So it was like a 6-hour drive, which was probably the shortest commute from Florida to Tennessee. So, you know, once again, it was me and a buddy of mine named Zarek that lived in Fort Walton Beach. We drove up there every weekend, and I did the Mystique thing for 2 years, driving from Florida every weekend. I never even moved. And we kind of initiated what people call the Florida Crew, which was a string of performers driving from our area to go do Mystique in Tennessee. And it kind of became a thing. But, you know, it's one of those things to where it's like, you don't know the opportunities that you have until really maybe somebody whispers in your ear, or you just have a conversation with somebody. And if you had told me when I was in high school that I would have been marching Mystique by the time I was 21, I wouldn't have believed it, because everything would have said, you know, I don't know what's going on or whatnot. So I ended up doing that thing. I started teaching high school, you know, right after high school, like the summer after I graduated. Mr. Sanders, who was my percussion instructor, started farming me out to go tech at different schools, because he saw the hunger, he saw the drive, and I guess I had communication on my, on my end, so, even after aging out, I was already like 4 or 5 years into teaching. And I just kind of decided, like, this is something that I like doing, I want to do, and I just kind of kept doing it. It took me a lot of different places, had a lot of successful groups. I taught a lot of groups. I mean, there were some years I was teaching, 3 to 4 schools at one time. And just, I remember like changing shirts in the parking lot at a competition because I had multiple groups there. So it was just like one band would get off the field, I'd change shirts and head back in. I was doing the Superman change on the head into the next band to go compete. So that was always entertaining. And I remember somebody had told me one time, they were talking to me, they were like, man, I was at this competition and they called your name so much on the staff roster that I thought you just worked at every school that competed that night. And I was like, when you're on that hustle, you just gotta keep it moving. So
Right.
where I'm at now, funny enough, I was at DCI Atlanta, and I had made it a habit of going to Atlanta every year just to go see the competition because it became the closest regional to DCI. So after I aged out, that was really kind of how I got DCI, was going to Atlanta, 5-hour drive. And I connected with a buddy that I marched Spirit with for 2 years. And he said, hey, man, I just finished a tour with Southwind. They're open class. They're starting to grow. And I'd really like you to come out, if you want to come teach drums with me. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. Let's reconnect. And he really did. He reached out at the, like the tail end of September-ish and was like, hey, I'd really like you to come in and be the battery coordinator. So everything kind of got set up in that way. That was Andrew Leitner, really good friend of mine. And we went through that kind of first audition phase and everything. And he had to end up leaving. And he recommended me to serve as the interim caption head for the 2016 season. So it was a real low-key tour. We did like 1 week of tour, 2 weeks of all days, because we just did a couple of the Southeastern shows going into the Atlanta regional, and then that was kind of the end of our season. They were just trying to really conserve money and save up so that they could propel the Corps to go back to championships. So after that 16 season, I got hired permanently as the caption head. And I guess that's where I say the rest is history. And I just kind of kept moving forward, brought in fine people like yourself. John Gall, who's the other co-captain head, was already there. And, we made a decision to promote him because he was just doing a fantastic job as a front ensemble coordinator and such a brilliant mind to work with. Yeah. And, I think I've been very fortunate because I don't think, you can never really get anywhere by yourself. And I am, thoroughly honest with that, to where it's like, I am surrounded by so many great educators, great people, etc., that, really a lot of the times I can just kind of step back and watch people work because they're brilliant and they do fantastic work. So I wouldn't dare on my dad's grave to, take credit for what such a group effort does especially in the drum corps activity, because, we just kind of, we figure out what it's going to take for us to get things done, and then we just keep moving forward. So.
Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree with you. If it wasn't for people encouraging me or tagging me along or making the connections and just stepping out of my comfort zone, I would not be doing what I'm doing either. And just on all the stuff that I've done in the places that I've been, it's just, I think there's something about when you're a younger person, you have to go out, you have to go do these things and take chances because, I get questions all the time. Well, how did you end up doing this? Well, how can I go do this? And it's like, put in the effort, reach out to people and give it your best shot. And it takes time. Like it's not going to happen overnight. It just takes time. And that's the key that a lot of people end up missing a lot of times, because people aren't patient. And and I had that reality check. I had that reality check many times. And you talked about how you went to auditions and they didn't go too well. I had many of mine as well. And I think that's something that, from my experiences, because nobody ever taught me how to audition. Nobody ever taught me, even in just like a concert band setting, like just going for first chair. Like nobody really taught me, like, here's what you do, like nobody, like just go in, like set up the drum, like see if it's like at your height, like simple little things like that's right there. Like set yourself up for success, like, things. And so from all of my experiences, I try to take the time now to like put that into my teaching. Is like, well, think about it. Like if you want to go do these things, you got to learn how to audition. And how you learn how to audition is just by going and auditioning. Like you just got to do it. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, the more comfortable you're going to get. And you're going to have bad auditions. Like it's going to happen. Like not every audition.
Reality.
It's just a reality. And like you said, where, at 15 or 16, you're just like on the inside, your whole world's crushed. I remember one of the big turning points for me was in 2013. I was finishing up at junior college, community college like you did. And I was wanting to do drum corps. And I was like, I've only got a couple years left. This is my time. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I went up to Music City because that was the closest one in Nashville, and I was not as prepared as I should have been. And I went in there and flaked through some things. I didn't have some stuff memorized. I had okay hands, but you can't go in there and halfway know the stuff, and didn't even consider me. And so after that, I was like, okay, I got to really do this right. And so I sent a video in to 7th Regiment. I really worked at it. I reached out to them, and they were like, yeah, you can send us a video. And thankfully, it was good enough to where they're like, all right, you can come up in January. And then my dad drove me 24, 26 hours or something like that, all the way up to Connecticut nonstop. He's like hyped up on mountain chocolate and snacks, and he's just like, looking crazy. And it was hard, man. That first night we got there, and it took us over a day. And that first night, I was completely exhausted. I was like, I was already defeated by the time I walked in the door. And if it wasn't for one of the support staff, Miss Daisy was this old little black woman who was a Surfers alumni, because that was the Surfers way back in the day, who's now where the 7th Regiment came out of after that. She sat, I'll never forget it. She sat me down and she said, "You want to go home?" And I said, "Yeah, Miss Daisy." I said, "I'm tired. I've auditioned before. This is not going well. I don't think this is for me." And she said, "And your dad drove you all the way up here for you to quit on the first night?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about that." And she said, "Boy, if I was your daddy, I'd beat you senseless like that. You're going to stay the whole week. I don't care if you don't make it. You're going to stay." And I was like, and I don't know this woman, and she's just getting after me. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you got a point. She said, "Don't you think you owe it to him, but even more importantly, yourself, to give it a shot? You have the rest of the weekend. It ain't over yet." And I was like, I don't know. And so I texted my dad that night. He's like asleep at the motel down the street, because he's out. And I'm like, "Man, you may have to come get me tomorrow. Like at lunchtime, I might be out. I don't know." And I remember sitting on that gym floor, and I was like, lights are out, and I was like, I can't quit on myself now. Like what if I turned it on right now? And so then I pushed through. And so the next day, I made it to lunch break the next day. And so I'm like, okay, I'm hanging in there. I'm like, let me just get through the next block.
Right, one block at a time.
block at a time. And I was like, oh, I saw the schedule. I was like, if I can make it to lunch, like maybe I can make it to dinner. And so I make it to lunch. And by that point, my dad is coming in and we're in the lunch line. And he kind of pokes his head in the, the little school cafeteria and he's checking things out. And he's looking at me and he's like, are you good? And I was like I'm good. I'm going to keep going. He's like, all right. And then I see Miss Daisy walk over to him. And I'm like, oh, no. What is he going to do? No. And that whole point, he was instantly sold on her. He was like, oh, yeah, get him. Get him. Like just rip him. Right. And I made it through the camp. And Dan Shack and Brendan Mason were the snare techs. And just some of the greatest minds out there, and were very brutally honest as well. And I go in for my individual audition. It was either later that day, Saturday or Sunday morning, and just kind of one-on-one with them, and went through the stuff. By that point, I was pretty comfortable. I'd gotten a little more comfortable, and they told me some harsh things, but they were like, we're gonna be really honest. We didn't think you were going to come back Saturday. Like Friday night was so rough. I was like, what do you mean? And so they were like, well, the fact that you stuck it out and you pushed through, because man, I walked in the door, they started with PT and I'm like, PT, like what? And I had not been working out at all. Like I was so dehydrated from being in the car, and like I passed out. I passed out in the first 30 minutes in the gym, and I'm like trying to put. They were like, "Man, we didn't think you would make it to the end of camp, but like you've turned it on, and like you're pushing." And they were like, "That's there's some things with your hands, we can fix. Your left hand looks a little crazy, but we can work with that. And you're older, and I think that's something that could be beneficial here." And, especially with younger cores and having somebody who's a little bit more mature. And they were like, well, how about this? We'll give you a call back. So this is your make it or break it chance. Like if you come back in February and you're ready to go and you're on it from day one, then we'll give you a contract at the end of camp. And I was like, all right, I'm in, I'm doing it. And, and it was around that time too, like even with college auditions, I went down, because I was sold I was going to go to Southern Miss. I was like, I'm going to study with Dr. Wooten, I'm going to do all this stuff. And I went down there, and that whole audition was a joke. And it was so bad. And like I'm playing a mallet solo. I'm not joking. I'm playing a mallet solo, and he cuts me off in the middle, and he's like, what is this piece again? And I told him. He goes, oh man, I hadn't played that in a long time. I think I was in 8th grade when I played that. And I'm like, and I was supposed to be like I was like, oh yikes, and like he was not interested in me at all, for full reason. Like I thought I knew what I was doing in community college, and I did not. And so I had to end up like transferring to Delta State. And Dr. Armstrong really got my butt in gear, and and they really set me straight. But I like that year I was like, I really want to do this. Like I've been on the fence. I really want to do it. I really want to do percussion. I really want to do music. And it took those bad auditions and some truthful words. Truth hurts sometimes, but but people need to experience those things. Like that involves growth. You can never grow unless you get out of your comfort zone. And so, that takes time.
I think that, I think that the students that are willing to go through that process will always come out on the other side of it with a greater benefit. And, I can't say enough how much patience and diligence and discipline just goes into like, realizing your full potential. Because I think there are so many students out there that have potential and people can see it, but they're not willing to go like the long yard to see it all the way through. Like they want a quick result. But it's like if you just held on for just a little bit longer, you would be on the other side of that fence. But some kids just stop digging before they get right to, you know, where they need to be. And that's unfortunate because I hate to see that. You know, I hate it when a student comes to me and says, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I'm not cut out for this. This just isn't me. And I've even had a student say, I know you're going to try to convince me to stay, but I don't want to stay. And it's like, oh man, like that's soul crushing from a instructor standpoint, because you're like, your potential is almost there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know, and it's thankfully, you know, I had a really good dad who, you know, took the time to be honest with me as well. And you know, and he's like, well, if you never learn from failure, then you're just going to accept that you're failure. You know, failures don't define you, or, you know, they're supposed, you know, they can define you, or they can define you, or they can, you know, destroy you, or they can develop you. And he's like, you're gonna struggle no matter where you go in life, no matter what it is. And if you can't learn now how to deal with struggles and like be humble and let your ego go, let your pride go, and just be humble and just open and just keep trying, then the possibilities are endless, because then you're doing it the right way. And if you're trying to learn from it, you know, don't let mistakes or failures, you know, hold you back. You know, learn from it, let it go, put it behind you, and just keep going. You know, and that's what I love about making kids audition. You know, because it's like, it's those little things, even if it's for a little bitty, you know, they might not even really want to audition for that thing, but it's like, no, it's good for you to go audition, because it exposes some things that if you don't go out and do it, then you don't really know what you got or what it takes, or if this is something you really want to do, or if this is how committed you are. Like it shows a lot of stuff. And I think, you know, for people who have always been scared about auditioning for drum corps, because I know for me it was scary, and that's why I waited so long to do it. And because I was afraid of failure. You know, I was afraid of being told no, and everybody's afraid of failure, you know, I think, for the most part. And you know, but if you'll never know unless you just go do it. You know, what's the worst? I remember finally my dad told me, he was like, what's the worst they can do? Say no? You're already not in it. I was like,
exactly.
Fair enough.
That is probably the best coined phrase that exists in the world, is what's the worst that can happen? They say no. Because, you know, I think a lot of people miss out on that key point, is like, you're already at the disadvantage because you're not a member. So it's like, if nothing changes, that's just the status quo. So by putting yourself out there, now you're challenging the status quo, and you have an opportunity to really like see what you're about, see what they're about, and see if this is the right path that you want to go down. And it's like, and if it's not, look, all you did, I mean, at worst, you sacrificed some time, but you know what? Once you make it, you're going to have to sacrifice time. So it's like, you didn't sacrifice any more time than once you make it. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's, I love that.
I was like, that's a really good point. I got nothing to say on that. And he's like, well, then just do it. Like, just shut up about it and do it. And I'm like, all right, fine. You know, but so if anybody out there, this is calling people out. If you're afraid of ever auditioning for anything, just do it. Just do it. Give it your best. Learn, ask questions beforehand. Study the packet beforehand. You know, learn when Sticks Out is, or Elanders will get you. And,
yeah. I've got the worst notorious stories for students not reading the packet before they come to camp, and that's man.
But you put all this time. It's like, I give you everything, so it should be self-sufficient. It's all there. It's all the information you should ever need to be successful, and you
You paid the money for the packet. You didn't even read it.
Paid the money, didn't read it, didn't bother to take a glance at it. You just see it. And I think the human condition, sometimes we make assumptions about how important things are. And it's like, yo, if you're in a position to where like you've got something ahead of time, always make the assumption that there is a particular reason for that. You know what I mean? Like, if it wasn't important, why would we even publish it ahead of time? We could have just handed it to you when you got there. You know what I mean? But if it's coming out a month, 2 months in advance, maybe that's a little clue there. That's like, I should take them a second, you know.
All right, check this out.
Yeah. Read through the details a little bit.
Exercises and not when sticks come out. And it's like,
right.
Assume. Don't assume. Never assume anything.
Nope.
Oh man. But you know, so moving on from that. First of all, again, if this has sparked any questions for anybody, go ahead and put them in there and we'll address it. My next thing I want to kind of pick your brain about, because you do a lot of writing and things like that. You know, I've talked to some people and about, you know, they write for high schools, they write for other groups and things like that. You know, and I always try to pick their brain on their writing styles and arranging and things like that, because I like to know how people's thought process is. And so, yeah, I've had one guy, he just straight up said, I just write whatever the music calls for. Like, difficulty never crosses my mind. If it just sounds like it's supposed to be that, then it's just that. I don't, you know, because there was a question one time of how difficult should you make your book, or how easy should you make your book, and things like that. And he was like, I just write the book. If they can't play it, then we work on it. If it's too easy, then that was just what the music called for. And it's like, all right, you know, and so, you know, there's some things like that. And it's like, well, there's a lot of truth to that. You know, he's like, I don't think about that part. And because I always think about, like, if I have a specific group I'm working with, I try to learn my students to where, you know, I know what their weaknesses are, I know what their strengths are. I try to write some to their strengths, and I try to write to some of their weaknesses, just so we can develop those things and we can continue to grow. And because if they can play the whole book on day one, then it's going to be a really boring season. And right. And you know, nobody's learning or getting any better. And I also believe that if everything is just too difficult, you know, then it's overwhelming and they're, you know, already defeated. And so, you know, thinking about it from someone who writes at the open class level, you know, is it a combination of those things? Is it something that you hear the music and that's just what you want to go for? Do you already have some ideas in mind? It's like, man, we're going to play just a crap load of flams. And, you know, cadets that one year was just flam, everything, you know, I don't know. And you know, it's just straight up flams for like 5 minutes. And it's like, I mean, that's cool. You know, that's a hard skill to do. But, you know, and kind of part two to this, visuals and like stick tricks, which I have my own like thought process on this. Is that something that you kind of envision as you're writing it, that you think this is kind of going to go in and teach it as it goes in? Or is that a separate skill that you think about, let's do this first, and then here's some ideas I've thought about, and we can add that in later? Or is there a timeline to that, or whatnot? Because so that's kind of a two-part question. But
okay, so I'll preface with that. Anytime I sit down to write anything, like, I want to know what is my ultimate inspiration. Like, is it another piece of music? Is it a type of flavor or mode? Is it a type of style, genre, etc.? And for me, it's about trying to get as emotionally involved in whatever source material is coming my way. Now, and I do that for cadences. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, if I'm getting ready to sit down and write a cadence, I look for inspiration in everything to say, okay, what do I want this to feel like? And once I've got that feeling, then really it kind of just starts festering. And then I say it very bluntly, I just start throwing up music on the page. You know what I mean? Like, once it's inside of me, it's like it's got to bubble a little bit, and then it just starts coming out. You know what I mean? Like type, 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 type. You know what I mean? So for a lot of it, it's yes, there is some cognitive space reserved for what are the skill sets that we're trying to display or what level of difficulty. Because I think it gets a spectrum. I think depending upon the style of music that you're playing, not everything is going to be difficult or it feels forced. But then there's some type of music to where, like, if it's a certain tempo, I'm going to just kind of sling it onto the page. And if I'm looking at it and it's in conflict with maybe the prior information that I have, then I try to find some ways to kind of rearrange it to get around some of those difficult passages that I've written. For the open class segment, it's a weird space because a lot of the students that come in, they're very good in the respect of, like, they're usually the great players coming out of their high schools. They're probably world-class cuts, meaning that they just kind of missed the mark on some of those world-class groups. So they are looking for that challenge, but we understand that there are still some things that prevents them from getting, directly across that hump. So I can't write a full-blown world-class book, or it would just be stressful all year long, and they would never get a sense of achievement. And that sense of achievement is so important. It makes them have confidence in themselves. It makes them have confidence in their ability. So I've got to make sure that, I service the model of making sure that whatever level that I'm looking at in terms of talent, which is why the audition process is so important, that we start looking at, okay, we've covered everything that we want to cover inside of this book. I can add more based on what level is coming in, with the understanding that there may be one or two passages that are a little bit difficult to achieve from a timing or spacing or even like a stick trick standpoint. That's kind of the interlude into your second part. Is I don't necessarily functionally think about stick tricks after the fact, more so than if I'm sitting down and I'm listening to something and I notice that it fits inside of, something that's different with the hands, then I will just go ahead and notate it in the score. And sometimes they can do it, sometimes they can't. I think I always plan for an alternate phrasing if it can't be achieved, because I know stick tricks took me a while to learn when I was growing up and in high school. Like, it wasn't something that was just real easy. Like, I had to keep practicing it. So I've got to be under the understanding that maybe not everybody's going to be able to achieve that. So I've got to be realistic about it. But it does take practice. So I don't want to take away from the fact that it's a cool thing. It's a fun thing that we do. And some students are going to have to go home and practice it. It's not going to come easy to everybody. Right. But, I think for as much as I have written and the opportunity that I have to write, because I always see it as an opportunity for me to grow a little bit, for me to challenge myself and how creative I can be with the tapestry, because it is my source of art. You know what I mean? Like, everybody kind of has their way to express art into the world, and this is one of the methods that I have to express art into the world. So I really take it seriously in terms of when I sit down to write something. Like I said, even as some people would say as minute of a task as writing a cadence, I don't think of that as an art, because somebody's going to perform that. And for somebody that has the will and the way to go and perform my music, I need to meet them halfway in terms of the amount of effort and energy that I put into writing that score, because just as much as it means to them for me to write it, it means just as much for me for you to play it. So I always take that opportunity to say, okay, am I doing my best in this moment? Can I do more? Never can I do less, but always can I do more to make this moment even better? So, I typically go through quite a few revisions when I'm going through music, because I want to make sure that I'm always putting my best effort out there. And then just be open to, that criticism, be open to that commentary. I work with a lot of great minds, especially with the drum corps, where we go through a lot of different segments between people back and forth. So it allows me to really dial in with them on, okay, what what marks are we trying to achieve, you know, throughout the score? Does it have enough drive? Does it have, you know, enough intrigue? Like, is this everything that we want to get out of this moment if we're trying to set up a certain moment in the show? So I try to make sure that I don't take anything personally when I write, and just know that part of the idiom that we are in terms of marching percussion, like, it's okay to change things. You know what I mean? Like, don't be so set on, you know, in stone in terms of what I'm doing, to say that, okay, I can't rotate or alter things a little bit inside of the score. I just gotta, you know, think about it a different way. And then, you know, sometimes that takes me a little while, because it's like the first idea that I put down is what I'm really excited about. But I get excited after a while once, you know, I try something else. And it's just about trying different things, making sure the formula works, and hopefully it turns out, you know, once we get down to the end of the competition season. So,
Yeah, and I think there's there's surely a lot of other factors that kind of go into that as well, and trying to time those things in the right manner, because you try to plan to where you don't want to peak too early,
right.
Or, you know, you don't want to keep struggling on this for too long, and then you have to change, and then we don't have enough time to really master the change. And so that's kind of a craft thing that kind of takes time if you're, you know, a teacher or things like that, to kind of figure that out. But yeah, I think you do have to be willing to, it's okay to change. Now, you know, that certainly doesn't mean, you know, don't change things too often, you know, because you're going to mess with their heads and things like that. But I also know, like, there's been times when, you know, when we taught together at Southwind where, man, standing still in the music block, that chunk, nail it. It's nails. And then they go to do the move on the field, and it's like, that you're not doing what we were doing 20 minutes ago in the shade, standing still. And
Nope.
you know, and so then you have to think about it in different ways. Like, okay, is it because we're not doing the proper marching technique? Is it because of the staging? Is it because of the movement is difficult? And so then you have to think about, you know, is the drill demand higher than the musical demand? Because, you know, there's a drill demand that you know, the visual people do too. And sometimes you get benefits. You get the benefit of getting the drill whenever you're writing, but a lot of times you don't. And so sometimes, until you see it unfold on the field, some things will be blatantly obvious that, no, that's not going to work. That whole thing, cut it. That's out. and you know, then there's sometimes where really, and sometimes, you know, you see it and it's like, okay, that was pretty dirty, but I think about, okay, if I'm the performer here, is it still possible? And it's like, okay, so the music demand was still high, but still playable, that we can achieve it, you know, a month or two from now. But we didn't anticipate the drill to be a high demand in this passage as well. And so I think that's another thing that, like, you know, you think about when you put them into, you know, percussion ensemble setting, when you're running chunks just with the drums, and then, you know, or even if you're doing just visual, you know, think about those passages that are also difficult on the visual demand as well. And I think that's another key thing that sometimes you just don't think about until you do it. I never really thought about that, because until I got to Southwind, I'd only taught really high school level, and most high school level percussion drill is elevator drill. You know, drill's not really, usually not that difficult. You know, indoor is where that pushes a lot of that. So, but if your kids don't have any indoor experience, and I didn't really have much at all, and so, you know, the drill demand is an aspect I had to learn of, you know, because I'm like, man, why can't they just play this? Like, we just played this, and, you know, and then after the fact, you know, days later, I'm thinking, okay, that chunk, they're having to do like 6 to 5s, and it's like 180 beats a minute, and they're playing like some high rolls and some flans. It's like, that's hard. Like, that is hard. That makes it harder. And, you know, so take those things into account too, as you're doing it as well. And it's like, sometimes you just might be like, that's like not even, it's humanly possible standing still, but we're like jazz running right here. This ain't gonna happen.
Right.
Because the drill, like, crazy stuff. Like,
and I think it's easier with the indoor segment to think about those things like ahead of time, because I've been fortunate in a good term of my career for a lot of the indoor writing that I've done to be able to write the battery book and the visual design. So I've been able to kind of consciously think about both as I'm doing it. So that really helps like the melding of ideas. But you're absolutely correct. Like that's another level of demand that people don't always anticipate. And even, you know, from a drill design perspective, because I've done a lot of drill books where I did not write the battery book. And I'm looking at the music like, okay, I got to get them from point A to point B without them blowing up. You know what I mean? Because I don't need them changing this or, you know, taking 30 years to clean this segment. So it's like there really has to be a symbiotic, you know, relationship there between the visual designer and the music arrangers to know, okay, this is going to be achievable once we get it on the move. It may take some finessing, but it can't be something to where it's like, all right, now I'm having them do, you know, jazz running while they're trying to play this really intricate stuff. And sometimes you just have to be aware, like, okay, if this is what the visual calls for, then the music has to change. And you can't get into those arguments or be upset, you know, when sometimes the music has to be altered to fit the bigger picture. And as long as you keep the big picture in mind, I think that'll always kind of lead you in the right direction. Yeah,
totally. 100%. I agree. And again, that stuff just takes, like, even as an educator, you know, I try to keep the mindset of, you know, I never want to be a teacher that doesn't stop learning, because if I ever get that way, or if I ever get bored with my job, then I'm not doing justice to the activity and to my students. And it's, you know, it's a different level of frustration when you when you change from performer to teacher. You have different frustrations, and you know, you can't play the book for them, you can't do the drill for them, but at the same time, you know, you also have to think about, you know, how is my delivery? Am I teaching this in the right way? Am I approaching this the right way? Should I, you know, I tend to overthink sometimes, but I try to keep a philosophy in mind where I try to be consistent. I think consistent is the biggest thing. And, but yeah, and I think as a teacher, whenever you get frustrated because you're not understanding why this isn't working, you know, I've had to learn to make that adjustment. It's like, okay, I've got to step back. You know, I need to reach out to somebody and like, okay, what am I not seeing here? Because I'm not getting it. And right. I think, you know, we have to still continue as teachers to be okay with that, you know, and like, we're not going to have all the answers all the time or know how to fix it. You know, we try to get in the game and try to fix everything. And it's like, sometimes I don't know how to fix this, you know? And, right. And that's okay. You know, it's still learning.
You know, I was blessed that my mom, she was a teacher for a good portion of my life. And I just recall, you know, her always telling me as a kid, like, never stop learning, never stop learning. And she preached that so much to me as a child growing up, to where it's like ingrained in my knowledge to just always try to gain as much information about things that are going on around me, you know. And I tend to be an inquisitive person because of it, and I ask a whole lot of questions. It's not because I forwardly want to be annoying, but it's because I want to know as much as I can know about a topic before, you know, I call myself being involved with it. Because if I don't, then I can't really feel that level of confidence that, you know, I'm on the right track unless I continue to gain more and more. So I almost put myself in a position of being like a research addict when I get involved in something, because I want to know as much as I can, because, you know, there's this little voice, and it's Ann's voice in the back of my head telling me, Ann, that's my mom, she's saying, never stop learning. You know what I mean? And
man, I hate how Instagram, you can only go live for an hour and then it just shuts off. And I tried to catch you, and I was like,
I heard it right as it was clicking off, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, man.
Oh,
I wish it
okay.
didn't do that. Yeah. You get an hour time limit, I guess, because, well, when me and you chat, it's always going to, well, we could be here all night, but,
Right.
but yeah, back to what you're saying, like, you know, never stop learning. Like that's really the key, you know?
I
So
agree. I agree.
absolutely. So man, this has all been like really, really good stuff. Some really good encouraging words. I think it's also good to show people, like, even if you're a big name, or, you know, somebody who's accomplished a lot, you know, not me, and
No,
I was doing that for me, you know, but but you know, like, people who think like, man, they achieved a lot, like they've done all this stuff, and it's like, you know, I think it's also important to show people, like, we're just human, you know, like we struggle too. It's, you know, even the people like you study with and learn from, like they've been right where you are. I think one of the most inspirational clinics that I was ever a part of, like I went to, there was a day of percussion in Mississippi a few years ago. I went to, and and I'm not even a big drum set player. I mean, I play drum set and I enjoy it. I don't study it and get deep down into it. But one of the clinics was a drum set clinic, and it was Mike Johnston, and who's just an incredible, incredible dude. And he was there, and he he played something, and he looked at somebody and was like, "Can you play that?" And they were like, "I can't play that. I suck." And he said, "Never, ever tell yourself that you suck. There's no you suck, I suck, they suck. No. The only reason why I'm right here giving this clinic is just because I've spent more time, and I'm older, and I'm further down the timeline than you are. That is the only difference between me and you. That does not mean your capability is any more or less than mine. Your capability could probably very much well be higher than mine. I'm not the best person who does this, you know." And he's like, I'm just further down the timeline than you are. And I think that was just a great reminder to myself, because you know, I used to be really bad about comparing myself with other people's success. You know, it's just kind of a normal thing. Social media is really bad about that. And you know, you try to compare yourself, like, man, they're doing this, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know, and it's not about that. No, it's not about that. Like, all of our journeys are different. All of our paths are different, but the thing is, it's like, if you want to get to where you want to go, put in the time to do it. Just get, like, roll your pants legs up, dig in the mud, like, just go do it, and roll the sleeves up and start rolling, man. And that's the thing. And it's like, if you want to get closer to where you want to be, then you've got to invest time. And then he talked about, I'm just further down the timeline than you are. That's the only difference. That does not mean that I'm better than you or you're better than me. That does not exist. That does not exist in our activity. He's like, that's the really cool thing about music, is that really anybody can be as well as they want to be. You know, you know, you have people that can push you, and it's great to have those motivators. But, like, you know, with you, I think it was so, you know, having you and just getting to know you over the last few years has just been so encouraging to me, because that's just who you are. Like, you're always, like, you're ambitious, you're a go-getter, you know, you ask questions, you're constantly, like, trying to continue achieving. And it's never about, you know, the medals or the placements or whatever. Certainly that's like, yeah, we would like to get there, but that's not the goal. The goal is to continue to grow. And I think, like, I remember the first phone call we ever had together, you know, interviewing for the position, and we chatted for like 2 hours maybe, and we were like, oh my gosh, he gets it. And it's like, oh man, we were like on the same page. And I was like, I'll go work for this guy anywhere. And I was like, cause this dude, like, I feel like it's so cool to work with people that you're in sync with, like, as far as your, you know,
your beliefs and like what you feel like is important. And
I agree.
I think what's always good is in tying those things into like life lessons, and just like that's just part of life. All of this is part of life. Music's just a great tool to learn more than just music. And so, you know, if your passion, you know, find your passion where you can. That's kind of on you. But as far as like where you want to be, man, like how much time are you going to put in it? Like how much time you got? Because that's
How
really
much time you got?
how much time you got. That's going to be the benefactor, you know. So, so does anybody have any questions? We haven't had a single question, which is rare. People scared today. I don't know.
Oh, they missing out on this knowledge.
They missed out, man. This guy is like a wealth of knowledge. Y'all afraid to pick his brain. I wish I could have a question that could stump him. It's like Stumpy Landers. See if you can stump him. You know, or something. But is there something that you have thought about or you wanted to bring up for the chat, or anything that's been kind of on your brain lately that's been like your new, like, you know, sometimes from time to time we have this revelation on something that's like, man, this, you know, or is there anything like that with you? Or
you know, the pandemic and everything has given me so much time to just really consider like everything that I'm involved in, everything that I'm doing. And you know, you go through life thinking one way, you know, kind of like, okay, this is kind of what I want to do, and this is kind of how I want to do it. And then something like this kind of gets dropped in your lap, and it's one of those things to where it's like it's an eye opener, but it's always just a reality check to say, okay, is this, you know, fitting your model of everything that you wanted to do? And I think this overall has given me just so much conscious awareness of how much of an impact that I have, you know, with what I do. And,
yeah.
you know, I always try to take the humble route. And, you know, it sounds bad to say that because I really don't have, you know, that much of an ego in terms of what I do. Like, you know, I have as far as an ego as what it takes to pump me up to go do something, you know, to get out of the house. Like, all right, let's go do this. And then, like, once I get out of the house, it's like, all right, I hope I don't get hurt. Like, do I have on my knee pads? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's as far as, like, the ego goes. But it's like, you know, I have such an opportunity to have such an impact on so many people that I come in contact with through auditions, through video chats, through just the stuff that I post, that, you know, I was like, if I was removed from that equation, what would the world be like? You know what I mean? Like, I'm all about positivity. I'm all about sharing the light that you have in the world. And thank goodness I got the ability to communicate my spirit more so than anything. You know, like, yo, you may not ever feel like you learned anything from drums from me, but you're going to learn, like, you need to be a good person, and it needs to show, because, you know, there's not enough positivity in the world, and we need more of it. You know, not that I don't want you to be a great musician. I've got some things to share in that realm, but ultimately, like, when you leave whatever conversation we're having, like, I hope you leave with the thought that being a good person is important as well. And you've got to find out what in life allows you to take that positivity and confidently share it with others. And this just happens to be my way of doing that. And I hope everybody kind of gets that, you know, moving forward, to say, okay, this is what you can do to have a positive impact on the world, because there's enough negativity to go around. We don't need more of it. We need more positive things out there. You know,
and negativity spreads faster. I believe negativity spreads faster than positivity does.
Agree. I agree.
You know? We do have a question now. So 3 top things to prepare a potential battery candidate for an audition.
3 top things. Top 3. All right. So I would say if you're preparing to be a battery audition candidate, number 1, involve yourself in whatever material is there prior to. If you can involve yourself in whatever material is there, Robert just got on. Whatever material is there ahead of time, like that's so beneficial because like we said earlier, if you are going somewhere and somebody took the opportunity to put material out for you to ingest ahead of time, how dare you show up to an audition not having made yourself aware and accountable for it, right? Yep. So that's the first thing is ingest the material that you've got ahead of time. Secondly, be willing to ask questions when you don't understand something. I cannot say how many times that I've had students come through the audition process. They had no clue how to do something. And then I always get the dropped mouth when I say, I got, 3 questions out of the 70 kids that showed up asking questions. And my email and my phone number is on page 2 of the packet. How many people used it? Nobody. And it's like, if I put my information out there, that means I want you to use it for that reason. And a lot of people, they never take me up on that offer. For the ones that do, they know I respond fairly quickly. Usually, it's less than 24 hours because I usually have my phone like glued to my hand. So it's like, I'm always down to explain anything that needs to be explained ahead of time because that's important. If you're taking the time to put this effort into learning this, I can take the time to make sure that you've got all the information that you need to make that achievement happen. So that's probably number 2. So number 1, ingest the material. Number 2, don't be afraid to ask questions. And then number 3, kind of like the summary of everything we talked about is you got to put in the work and you got to put in the time. You can't start looking at material a week before the camp and think that you're going to be prepared for such an audacious goal as Drum and Bugle Corps. Like, it is the elite. And it's not something that a lot of people like do for fun. Like, we do it for fun, but we kind of take it seriously because it is very competitive. So there's a lot of time that we're putting into making sure that this entire machine works. So if it's something that's important to you and you want to go do it, you've got to put in the time and effort ahead of time to get yourself to that point of view. And maybe that's getting the packet ahead of time. Like, you're not going to have the funds and resources to march that year, but maybe you get a packet, go to an audition, see what that process is like so that you can understand the audition process, and you start learning the material and chopping out before the next audition season. Because preparation is only turns into success when you've taken those opportunities and put in that time and effort. And if you can put in that time and effort ahead of time, it just makes it so much more real for us, especially in the audition phase, where we're trying to look at so many different people and seeing like what sets you apart. And typically what I find that sets the candidates that end up getting contracted apart is because they have taken the time to ask those questions ahead of time. And then I can just tell they put in a lot of work behind a pad, behind a drum, on a floor, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
that's good stuff. So there's your 3. Oh man, cool. Well, if there's shout out to Robert. If there's nobody else here who wants to ask a question or pick his brain, stop. I don't know. Be like, can you play the snare break from Spirit 2004? There's a stump.
I watched our 2004 show like less than a week ago. I was pulling out old DVDs and I found it. And I looked at the battery break, and it's just like a bunch of like tap 5s that like it's got some like jazz kicks in it. I think I could probably play it. It wouldn't be like sheet music accurate because I was telling I don't remember who I was talking to the other day, but like I was thinking about when I marched drum corps, and it's like I teach drum corps now, and it's like when I marched drum corps, like, man, I marched drum corps like 16 years ago. Like, somebody was born and has made their way into high school well into high school during the length of time since I marched drum corps. So I'm like, I'm not saying I'm old, but I kind of feel old because that's like half somebody's, it's like half my age at this point. So it's like, oh, yes. Yeah, I could probably squeeze through it, but I don't want to embarrass myself with it. So I'll let it live in the history where it is. So.
Oh, here's a good one. The toughest battery book you ever played.
Probably yeah, Mystique was one of the toughest battery books I ever played. I'd probably say like Mystique in 2007. And yeah, Mystique in 2007. And it's just because like the visual demand that we had on that show was so outrageous that there were literally parts when we got the music, like it was like, okay, like I can thumb my way through this. But then when we started learning the visual, I could no longer play the book. And it was bad to where it was like, all right, you guys need to have this worked out with the feet after dinner, and we're gonna be going in the ensemble to work this chunk. And I was freaking out because like out of like 7, I think we had like out of 8 snares, there was like one dude that could do it. And all the rest of us were just like we were getting back from dinner break early, like trying to figure it out. And like I ended that camp a disgrace because I could no longer play the book at that point. And I had to go home, and like you're talking to a 22-year-old that was aging out. I had to go home and I had to practice because I could not play the book and march it. Well, with the visuals that we were doing. But when you're trying to be a trendsetter, like you're doing stuff that nobody's ever done before. And it was one of those, it was like an extended visual phrase that went past the music. And it was like, it was kind of like the first of its time back in WGI heyday. But it was one of those things to where like we really had to work on that stuff to be able to play it. And that I would say hands down, like that's where I struggled the most to be able to play was in the Mystique in 07.
Kind of goes back. Yeah, it kind of goes back to that. You think the musical demand's like, oh, this might be all right. Then you meet the visual demand, and you're like, what is this? I can't move and play this. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
that is so much truth right there. Or here's the funny, what I always hated about visual block, because all the viz techs are always thinking like outside the box and are always wanting to try like everything. Like, what if you played this like on your head or something just crazy? And and like you learn the drill and you finally get comfortable and you're like, okay, I can watch and play this pretty well. And then all it takes is, drums, can you try doing this facing backfield and coming at it from this? And it's like, you want me to do what? And try to do what? Because now I got to listen different. And it's like, why do you?
Yeah, right. And no one ever takes that into consideration. It's like, you realize when I turn and face the other direction, like this entire, like everything is flipped at this point. Like, like my left is now my right, like listening's all off. And it's like, it's going to take me a couple of reps to figure this out. It's not a quick adjustment. So I at least try to be cognizant of that now. Like when we get into drill segments, I'm like, are they having to go backwards at any point? Because we need to start working on these turns like now. Or you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, otherwise doing it on the fly, especially not for the bass drums, not going to happen. Nobody got it. Nobody has it at all.
Yep. And then they're looking at us like, I'm like, man, I wish I only had 3 buttons to press. Like, just holding my horn up like, yeah, you lost your mind.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult.
It's so funny, man, because that's so true. And I've had those on the fly. And it's like, what if you started like on your knee and then you got up and then waited 4 counts and then went to your set? And I'm like, okay, so I still have to get there in the same amount of time, which means my step size has to be bigger. And now I've got to still play the part and like get up and then like, what do you like? You dumb. Oh, and then they just expect you to do it. And then if you say anything, they're like, just do it. And then I'm going to figure it out. That was the thing I hated so much. Figure it out. Just figure it out. I'm like, I can't. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to ask you questions, but you ain't telling me nothing. You know.
Right.
Here's another one. If you could march again, which corps would you try out for? Ooh.
Ooh, dicey.
Yeah, because you could get some responses.
I feel like I'll either make fans or people will hate me. Like they'll be like, never again, E. Like,
Right.
what corps would I try out for? I will say it's difficult to answer that question because when I was marching, like I really was impressed by what Phantom was doing. And Rennick had just gotten there, like 03, 04 was like his first 2 years at Phantom. I had never seen any of Rennick's work before that when he was at Crown or anything like that. So really that was kind of like, and 03 was the first time I ever went to championships because it was in Orlando, so it was in Florida. You know, I've always loved the Blue Devils. I think they're a great corps, but I don't think I would want to march Blue Devils, like, you know, kind of after the fact. Like, you know, they just have, there's something that I will always love and appreciate about the Blue Devils because they were kind of like my introduction to drum corps. But I think if I had the opportunity now, I wouldn't want to march Blue Devils. But, you know, I was always a fan of like, what Jim Casella and Ancona and Murray Gussick was doing at that time. So it's like, I know I'm probably going to break some hearts here, but like, I feel like the people representing that in this day and age is like Bluecoats and maybe Mandarins. Like they're exploring those different types of sounds and textures that like, I think that I would be drawn to as a performer. Not that I don't like what everybody does, because I feel like everybody serves as an inspiration for me, especially being a writer and a designer. But I think as a performer, like looking into my heart of how I like to perform and what I like to do, like one of my favorite books in the last decade was Bluecoats 2015. I love that music. Not solely biased because they played a chart that we played at Mystique in 07, which they did. But just the way that the score was written was so complimentary, and it made you feel good to kind of play it. Like that's the kind of stuff that like I strive for when I write, is like music that feels good to play. You can always bob your head to it, and it just flows. So like I think that's the style that I would shoot for, like either modern day Mandarins or a modern day Bluecoats.
Cool.
Can't believe I said that out loud, but there it is.
Oh man, that was a good question, because I was like,
that was a really good question. Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, it's a good one. Cool. Well, if there's no more, I guess we'll get close to wrapping it up. And dude, thank you again. This has been awesome. It's always a pleasure, and you know, I hope we can continue to talk in the future. You know, you can always reach out to me, of course, if you ever need anything. And if you guys don't know Elanders Frazier, man, go follow him, go check his stuff out. Just a cool dude. You know, like if anything, the dude's gonna make you laugh and smell like his. You just see him give his goofy grin, and he's like, you can't help but just smile. He's just like, yeah, you know, all the time. And I'm like, and it's just so much fun. And I miss those days. I miss coming down and you know, those long nights after a long drive and staying up until way too late eating Whataburger and milkshake and the biscuits. Man,
good times.
You know, that's good times, man. And
yeah, man.
And I really appreciated it, and I'll never forget those. It was such a great stuff, and I love all you guys, and I hope we can all get together again at some point and chat and hang. So that would be really cool. So I'm glad to be back down in the SIP, and hopefully coming back down.
You know? I bet you warm now too, ain't you?
Oh my God. Dude, and I'm back in the Delta. So I was like, dude, these mosquitoes You gotta punch them. You can't swat them. You gotta punch them. Like you gotta knock them out.
Oh,
Man, the humidity is real, man. Humidity is real. But oh man, it's cool. Well, thank you, man. Thank you to everybody who came out. And if you missed it, this is gonna be posted later. It's gonna be on my YouTube. It'll be on here as well, and so you can come back and watch later. Tag your friends, all that good stuff. And so we'll get going from there. So Elanders, good chatting with you.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Ryan. A
See you
pleasure
again.
as always.
Absolutely. All right, man. Till next time.
All right.